Well, I think it's fair to say that Iowa is kind of, and I said the great sorting hat, right? Every campaign, even with 24 different candidates, that Iowa is really going to winnow down the field. And that's the case. It's always been the case. So yeah, Iowa is a significant priority for me. I think it'll be a significant priority for this entire field.
It's only 3 years in. How are you going to know whether it's getting traction? How are you going to know the state?
Well, hopefully, I think that Iowa's actually not unlike Montana in as much as that there's a big part of it that it's people to people. It's not just the big events. It's not just big stages. It's actually talking to people and listening. And I think that been able to do a pretty good job of that in Montana. I think that's what I will do here. How you'll know as it pays off is hopefully you get crowds and you're talking to folks and they say, I'll be with you. Ultimately, this all comes down to something that happens next February. Yes, sir.
We've seen a great deal of pretty tremendous flooding here in the last few months in the tri-state area and across Iowa. With projections that climate change is going to keep those coming stronger. What's your plan to, do you have a plan to address climate change, whether it's by reducing greenhouse emissions or, investing in mitigation?
So you have to do both, right? You have to be more resilient, but ultimately, and the scientists say we got to get rid of 40 billion tons of greenhouse gas emissions. We have to get to a point of carbon neutrality. It's great that we're finally getting to have this conversation that climate change, like last year, 2 years ago, I had the worst fire season in my state's history, 1.3 million acres burned. You're having some of the worst flooding that you've had. Yes, you got to deal with resiliency, but for the future, we also have to address climate. We have to regain our international leadership on climate. Going back into Paris, we can't do this alone. China emits twice as much greenhouse gas emissions as we do. So we have to lead, not just in our country, but in our world. You can take simple steps, and the president the first day should not only rejoin Paris, but should also turn around and say, they got rid of the CAFE standards, Trump did, the fuel efficiency standards. The auto companies weren't even asking for that. 30% of what we need to reduce could be done through energy efficiency, and you'd put people to work. And I think what you have to do is actually convene the table, and the table certainly includes scientists, it includes conservationists, it includes business, it includes utilities, and say, what's our short-term greenhouse gas CO2 reduction, and what's the long-term? And make sure that we are taking bold steps from the start.
Back in Washington, disaster aid funding is tied up because of Puerto Rico, disagreements about what to do about aid for Puerto Rico. Do you think that they should handle that separately, handle other places like here, Heartland, by itself, or do you think they should put it all together?
Yeah, well, I think they should do both. I know that's not helpful, but from the perspective of individuals in Puerto Rico certainly need the help, just as Iowans do. When I've had significant fires and flooding, it shouldn't become a political game when there are pretty good prescribed rules of when you should get reimbursed. So either way, I know and I understand even 2 days in, Iowans need help and relief.
You were here in Dubuque last summer.
Yeah.
Your first visit. And this is a place that went plus 17 for Obama 8 years ago, plus 14 Obama back in 2012, and then went into Trump's hands. From your assessment, why did the Democrats lose to Dubuque?
So this is a state that hasn't gone Republican since Eisenhower. Now, I didn't get the assessment. I wasn't here in 2016. I was kind of busy trying to win from my own race. But I think fundamentally, we need to be giving individuals in Dubuque a reason to vote for us. They have to be able to identify with the Democratic Party. And that's what I plan on doing, not just here and everywhere else.
Why did the Democratic Party not do it in 2016?
Well, I think it's easy to look backwards. I mean, in some ways that you don't. The party might have sliced and diced the electorate a little bit too much, saying you can win here and here and here, and not putting as much attention in other places. And my problem with that is, even if you win, like even if you cobble together 270 electoral votes at that point, if there are both regions in a state or entire states that feel like this party doesn't care about me, well, you're never going to be able to govern, because you also have to win back some of these Senate seats we've lost and House seats.
Do you have a question for now?
Yeah, how do you balance the need to reduce CO2 and coal interests like your state and others?
Yeah, like, look, there's been more coal plant closures in the last 2 years than 8 years under Barack Obama. Right? I mean, in part, we're seeing that naturally happen along the way. Now, fundamental, and we just actually signed a bill. It was great. It was a Boilermaker who brought a bill who said, you know what, also for like coal strip, as part of it, that's our big plan, as part of it closes down, I want to make sure that prevailing wage is paid, so we're going to keep good jobs along the way. So fundamentally, I think that coal will still have a purpose for some time. Technology could change it. You know, we actually produce more or as much oil from enhanced oil recovery as we do from new wells. But we ship the CO2 up from Wyoming. When you could actually capture the carbon if technology was there and deposit the carbon, like that might be a possibility. What we've got to recognize is we got to incentivize, we put people on the moon. We ought to be able to make both storage batteries. We ought to be able to figure out new ways to decarbonize. And if we can't do it, then those products or those fossil fuels will end up gone.